Welcome back to Ireland AM. It has been a decade, 10 years since Ireland became the first country to legalise same-sex marriage by vote.
And since that vote in 2015, almost 6,000 same-sex couples have married across Ireland. What a 10 years it's been.
It's been incredible. Here to look back on that historic day, please welcome James O'Hagan, Moninne Griffith and David O'Reilly. Thank you all so much for being here. I really do have to shout out the fact that Alan Hughes is not here today. Yeah. He's not watching, he's not doing that, but we're like, Alan, could you not come in? He's like, oh no,
it's a special day, I'm taking it off.
It's a special I'm done. It was like, you got married before it, you got married on it, and he's like...
Still celebrating.
I'm done.
all
done.
These years later.
And Alan did so much for that. Thank you so much, but he couldn't be bothered coming into work today. Come here, James, how are you? Like, it's 10 years.
Yeah, it definitely ages me. I was looking back at pictures this morning of like when I was going out to vote, me and my mother going up to the polling station, and was noticing that I had quite a lot less white in my beard and probably was carrying myself in a bit more of a youthfully energetic way. But it really is remarkable to see that to think that it's 10 years ago, and thinking back to that time and kind of like how even on the day you didn't think it was possible, you still thought, no, this isn't going to happen. And it felt like a referendum on whether the Irish people actually accepted you as you were, even though I suppose it was about marriage. It actually just felt like, is it okay for you to be part of our society? And Ireland said a resounding yes.
Yeah, it really, like, it was such a... Oh man, it was so emotional. And it really was it was really one of those moments. I suppose it's going to be with us forever. Moninne, like, you were instrumental. You were part of the team in terms of getting it across the line. Tell us about your involvement in this. It's wild thinking about it, right? Yeah. Particularly thinking about that time and thinking about, for so many of us, it was like we expected it to just be a given, right? It was like, yeah, well, of course it's going to be a yes. But talk us through how much work actually needed to go into that yes.
Yeah, well, decades of work, really, starting with decriminalisation in 93, equality legislation in the 90s and the noughties, very little visibility. So you're right when you shout out Alan Hughes, because people like Alan and David Norris were really out there being visible and making sure people didn't forget that we exist. But before then, there was very little visibility of LGBT people in public life. And Dr. Anne-Louise Gilligan and Catherine Zappone, who took their case, they got married in Canada, took their case to the Irish courts, were really the first people to be out there in the media talking about same-sex couples wanting to get married and living ordinary, boring lives together, and just wanting to have the same rights and protections as any other couple or any other family. So the marriage equality campaign was set up in 2008. Launched, we learned from what had happened in Spain and Canada and other countries that had brought in marriage equality, gave us that Irish twist, and really was about empowering LGBT people to come out and tell their stories in the local media, the national media, just about how, why we would want access to marriage equality and want our families and our relationships recognised and protected in the same way. And then fast forward to 2015, a referendum was called. So marriage equality, the Gay and Lesbian Equality Network, and ICCL, the Irish Council for Civil Liberties, came together and formed the Yes Equality Coalition. And really then we activated over 80 local groups, Yes Equality groups across the country, who came out and knocked on doors every night of the week and spoke to people about why I was voting yes, and these are the reasons why, will you consider it? And we were getting continuously 6 out of 10 homes were saying yes. Some were saying no, and that was fine. That was absolutely people's prerogative. But honestly, I was on the bus all over Ireland, the big colourful yes bus, and I up in Donegal, all corners of the country, and the grannies and the granddads were telling us, yes, I'm voting for you. I'm voting for my grandson, for my granddaughter. Yeah. And so we knew, I knew by the time we got to the 22nd that we had it in the bag.
It was, I just remember when the votes were coming in county by county and watching, Dublin Castle, like Glendon, the George, like all that sort of stuff that was happening.
Brown and the George as well, yeah.
But it's very interesting. The civil rights campaign in Ireland obviously started like in the north. It really, like with Catholics and Protestants and voting on human beings being who they are. Like as a woman, you're used to being judged. But David, how was it, like, genuinely having to go, Harriet, can you give me some rights? Because the voting process was very different to any other political process. You had to kind of be, hi, can I have some equal status? It was a strange thing to have to do when I think back on it now.
Oh, it was, and what was really strange was you were engaging in conversation with people who had such strong opinions, whether it be a yes or a no, and at times you're putting yourself in really vulnerable positions. So as a person, you almost seemed like, and what we had been doing our whole entire life, anybody who's gay knows that growing up you're constantly seeking validation and acceptance. So to have that on such a grand scale, it, at times was very overwhelming. But I think what came out of that was something so beautiful and monumental that we got this resounding, as James said, kind of acceptance. But also for the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't need to make myself palatable. And that was really, really overpowering and overwhelming and just kind of really life affirming in a way, to kind of go, actually, do you know what? I am enough, and that might sound
palatable
a bit...
as in mask, like just kind of
physically
to conform.
To conform for people, and we're only talking about this, you know, in the green room, you know, as gay people, we often, and particularly in our industry, have to make ourselves palatable to different people's wants or needs. But it, just even in life, it's a societal norm, making yourself, you know, somewhat easier for someone to be able to relate to you or to listen to you or to even just accept you or engage in a civil conversation. And, you know, engaging in conversations with family members who were unsure was probably one of the most amazing things that came out of this.
Yeah.
Looking at Vincent there in the George
yeah, we were
as
just
well.
looking at the
Like, I remember that day so well.
James, tell us about, like, looking back on the campaign for you, like, were you knocking on doors as well? Did you have, like, tough conversations with people at the door? And again, like, this is me, this is who I am. I'm just a regular dude, and I'm just looking for respect.
Absolutely. It's sort of looking back now, it's amazing, because it was kind of the first time I stepped into the world of sort of activism.
Yeah.
You know, I was in the lead up to it. It was kind of the first time that maybe I'd been confronted so tangibly with the fact that being a gay man, my access to society was just different to, say, to my brother or my cousins. And so when the opportunity to go and knock on doors, when those like 80 groups set up around the country, I was like, okay, I have to do this. I'm going to look at this moment for the rest of my life. And if I haven't gone out and made an attempt to even for myself, I just will remember that forever. So it was not something at the time that I would have felt possible to do, but going out and knocking on doors and having those conversations, overwhelmingly positive, but there were times you would talk to someone and they would have reasons that they didn't believe that it was appropriate for same-sex couples to get married, and you would have to, you know, you would have to maybe, like, you know, press down some of the more emotive responses to be able to say, right, we understand this is where you're coming from, and this is, you know, this is how you believe. And I think, like, thinking today, I think back to some of those conversations I had with people who were very torn on the issue, and I kind of hope that 10 years on that they look around and go, you know what, actually, even though I didn't think at the time that it was right, looking at sort of the positives that it's brought to society now, I hope that they can kind of say, they can reconcile and go, I'm glad it passed in the end.
It's very interesting. I remember it was, like, genuinely look at these scenes, and I viscerally remember the happiness in the country, and it felt really good. Then we had the 8th referendum, things got a bit tetchy, Moninne, and it was sort of... I remember listening to a podcast with Blind Boy, and he was talking about the marriage equality referendum a couple of years ago, and he was like, and everyone with the pride flags in their things, and he went, and now these same lads people are changing their viewpoint, because things have, it was overwhelmingly positive, but 10 years on, is it still as positive?
I wish it was. For the first 5 years, yes, I can say obviously I was made redundant very happily by the Irish electorate on the voting day. So the next job I took was belonged to the National LGBT Youth Organisation, who'd been instrumental in the Yes Vote, getting out young people to vote and talking to parents. And for the first 5 years, things were really great. The day after the vote, 60 new young people turned up to the Belong To groups because they felt, as you said, it was visceral. They felt that they belonged now in Ireland and that it was safe for them to come out. And the groups flourished around the country, LGBT youth groups, and parents and teachers spoke about young people coming out, and it was a really happy time. And then about 5 years ago, we noticed a change in temperature. Online, of course, first, with language, hateful language, homophobic language, transphobic language. And then young people started to talk to us about how they were, the increase in bullying in schools, not feeling safe on the streets. We started to hear about, gay bashings, like had been more prevalent, I suppose, in the 80s, not really a thing of recent past in Ireland. Thank God these things were starting to happen again. And even in LGBT organisations, including our own, we started to get threats online and offline, and, a concerted attack. Now, a lot of that we believe is coming from abroad, and it's coming from far-right fundamentalists and fundamentalist Christians, but it's tapping into stuff here. It's a small minority of people here in Ireland who are very vocal but don't represent the majority.
And it's not against, just say, not against Christians, but 54% of people online is just bots. Stoking
Absolutely.
up. Let's remember,
Absolutely.
the internet's talking to the internet.
Yeah.
A lot of it isn't humans anymore. So that's
until someone gets attacked. I mean, we've seen
exactly. Brendan Courtney recently.
Prominent attacks. People have been attacked in the street. And that's happening more and more. What could be done about it then?
Well, just to remind people that this is not the majority. So when we're talking to younger people who are feeling really afraid because they don't remember a time before marriage equality, when unfortunately many of us have been here before. We have to remind them to stay hopeful, that we've been through this before, and to stay joyful, resilient, resist this, and that we'll get through it. I think in terms of what needs to be done, we need our allies to come out with us again. All those scenes, those joyful scenes, so many allies knocked on doors and came home to vote, and that they need to stand with us again.
That's one thing that, David, you're wearing the Yes Equality badge that I remember so well. I have it in a frame, and it's just so lovely. You were the home to vote. Can you remember that home to vote? And I remember Virgin Media, the lads being out at the airport, and you were one of the home to vote people. You were in London.
Well, yeah, I lived in London, and I think for a lot of expats, we kind of we wanted to engage with this campaign, even though we were far away. And looking at some of the photos yesterday of people coming from Bangkok, Australia, just to come home and vote in a country. And as James said back in the green room as well, it was because they knew that eventually they'd come back to Ireland, and this was the country that they wanted to live in. So being part of that change was important to people. So social media, as bad as it is, and trust me, in the last year I've learned the real negative side of social media, particularly with homophobic language, but it can also be this beacon of enlightenment and education. And I think the home to vote and encouraging expats to come home and vote was powerful, and also led to conversations and people
amazing.
going...
And the celebrations were incredible as well. Just very quickly, brass tacks, any weddings over the last 10 years? It's been 10 years. Any weddings? Moninne, congratulations.
Myself, got married,
huge congrats.
And I got engaged just before Christmas to my beautiful partner.
Oh, look at
Diego, look at him
Hi,
there.
Diego. And David's like, thank God they put the picture up. His face just went.
I can't even get a handshake, so...
That's the next campaign.
Nothing's changed there.
We'll put it out there. 082, what's the
Island AM. Modern day Tinder for days.
086 6 111 1. He can't get a handshake, lad.